All right, man. What if this is nothing new for Yinzer Nation, Steeler Nation? Okay. This might be the biggest kick in the ass draft memory of Pittsburgh sports history.
Uh-oh.
I'll take you back a minute. No, my first memory, I got my notes here so I make sure I got it all right. Watching a Steeler game, and this is actually true. My first memory of watching any Steeler game was in 1982.
Okay.
6 years old. I remember watching this with my grandfather. That game was the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets, which ended up being Terry Bradshaw's last game. I remember he blew out his elbow that game. And I don't know if they won or lost that game or not, but anyway. Steelers had Cliff Stout that year at quarterback. After with Bradshaw leaving and retiring. Cliff Stout, though, was a decent quarterback from what I read. I mean, you remember Cliff Stout as somebody who is like garbage, right? He left for the USFL, if you remember that.
Okay.
And I understand it from reading multiple online reports from Steeler peeps, like some of the legacy media, before they went get off my lawn crazy, that Chuck Noll, instead of drafting Dan Marino, wanted Mark Malone. By the way, this was a Chuck Noll decision from what I've read. Key thing, what I've read. I don't want any of you Yinzers upset at me, come up or, well, that's not how this is what I read. Your GOAT Steeler coach made a bad personnel decision. A bad personnel decision.
Imagine that.
What if the Pittsburgh Steelers actually drafted Dan Marino in 1983 and went back-to-back with Hall of Fame QBs? Let me tell you, the 1984 championship game against the Miami Dolphins would have been a lot different. Doubt Miami would even have been there. That year, the Steelers were 9-7 that year.
Yeah,
but they won the AFC Central.
Yes.
Right? That year, 1984, Denver was 13-3. Seattle was 12-4 because they were in the AFC at that time. And your Raiders were 11-5. They were all in the same division. They would probably played Seattle, then Denver. Could have then faced the Dan Marino Pittsburgh Steelers faced the 49ers in the Super Bowl that year.
That'd have been epic. Epic, bro.
Epic.
Montana versus Marino. The Pittsburgh boy playing against Western Pennsylvania.
Another Pittsburgh boy.
Pro.
Right?
That'd have been epic.
So here's a question. I got some other notes as we go through this. Did you and previously we were talking, you had a what if previously about AB's career. What would Dan Marino have done for Louis Lips's career? Instead of the Marx brothers, Mark Duper and Mark Clayton, he would have been throwing to Louis Lips and John Stallworth.
Yeah.
Luigi Thompson, Benny Cunningham.
Calvin Sweeney.
The domino effect, GB. How much longer does Chuck Noll coach with Dan Marino?
You know
how many rings does Chuck Noll have?
You know what? I'm going to tell you something. There probably wouldn't have been a Rod Woodson if there was a Dan Marino, because we would have never had an opportunity to draft him. Probably wouldn't have been a Rod Woodson.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And who else?
But
Go ahead.
but on the flip side of that, there probably would have been another opportunity to win the fifth Super Bowl, I would guess.
One for the thumb when it came quicker, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Shula couldn't get it done, but he never could put together a defense. But
Or a
I
running
mean,
game. Yeah.
yeah, where we were pretty good at that, even when we sucked. So like
Walter
we would,
Abercrombie, bro.
hey bro, we would lose, but we would still beat you up. We would still be more physical. You know what I mean? Like we wouldn't be, we so the games were still entertaining even when you sucked, like because at least we whooped your ass even though we lost. So um, I think that with Marino, or it could have really went bad because word on the street is that probably Marino getting out of Oakland was probably the best thing that ever happened to him.
Hmm.
Because he has some demons. He was a young kid.
We all
Right
do.
in his backyard. I mean, so I can see it going really, really good, and then I could also see it going very, very, very bad. It could go one way or the other.
100%. And off the field stuff, playing in your hometown where you grew up,
Oof.
where you played college, like essentially you never leaving, right?
Yeah.
So I think Chuck Noll probably does coach a little bit longer. Who knows, right? I know he was more of a get on with your life's work. If you've seen all those videos, he was big. It was bigger than football and things like that, right?
Yeah.
How many more rings the Steelers have within Chuck Noll? Maybe two, maybe three. Because some of those, if he bled into those early '90s, maybe with some of those defenses, right? But that probably means no Bill Cowher,
Yeah.
which means probably no Tomlin, which also means probably no Ben, which means I thought about this. That whole collapse happens probably when we're in college, right? In the mid to late '90s.
Yeah. 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 The dark ages.
The
I
dark
mean, we
ages would have
couldn't.
been in the mid '90s instead of Cordell and Yancey Thigpen going off on the Broncos and then losing the championship game, all that crap. We're probably bottom of the
We're,
above of the league.
we probably believing in Trent Dilfer at the moment.
If you remember when we did the one, when we did our what if, would have Ben was traded to the 49ers. So let's say, because if you remember, Marino in the late '90s is when he started to kind of fall off
Yep.
with with three knee braces on two knees. If we would have drafted a QB in 1997, let's say we were going to get somebody as Marino was falling off. 1997, there was one quarterback taken in the first round. Your boy, Jake Drunkenmiller.
Oh my gosh.
98. I don't really remember. Really was it? Maybe I don't know. I put feasible question mark on my notes, which means I don't know if there was one. So feasible outside of it was Manning and Leaf, and then after
Leaf.
that was like
Yeah, I
nothing.
don't remember anybody after that.
I don't think anybody went like for a while after that. So, and the last possible solution, if the Steelers would have been bad enough in those late '90s, would have been '99. Are they bad enough to go top five for Couch McNabb and Akili Smith?
Ugh.
Or would that have been in the teens? And the quarterback of your Pittsburgh Steelers in 1999 would have been Cade McCown? Prolonged success
Bro.
from the 70s and probably into the 80s and early 90s, but that purgatory hits hard and it hits real bad in the 90s and it probably bleeds into the 2000s. And Heinz Field opens up with a crap team.
And next thing you know, we are the Dallas Cowboys.
How about
We
them?
ain't won shit since the We ain't watched this since '92. You know what I mean? Like that's probably what it would look like for real.
It would. We would. You know what? We probably have 7 or 8 rings, but we haven't won one, and blah 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 blah. You know, it's
yeah.
So my thoughts on this, the 3 bullet points I made on this, I do think the Steelers get 2 to 3 rings with Marino. Louis Lips is an instant Hall of Famer. He extends his career. I think he finishes with over 700 receptions. I think he gets to 10,000 yards, 70 plus TDs, pretty much doubling most of those career stats. Because if you remember the quarterbacks that Louis Lips played for, just trash. Stallworth also gets to 700 catches and 10,000 yards and 75 plus TDs.
When did he retire? What year did he retire?
It was like in the I think it was like late 80s.
Was it that late?
It might have been mid 80s. Yeah, he played for a while. Yeah. Bad enough to take Cade McCown, probably. Then you're probably picking a top 10 in 2001. If you're picking in a top 10 in 2001, guess who else is not here? Big Snack. That means no Super Bowl runs
at all
in the early 2000s at all. Now, who knows? I have to go back and look at the drafts. You never know who would happen, but you're starting to talk about like all these icons not here because of one draft decision, and it was sitting right in front of them. If you remember, the Steelers took Gabe Rivera, the defensive tackle, instead of Marino.
Yeah. Because they wanted them, they thought that he was going to be the next Joe Green.